So, when we look at this World War One memorial, right, the first world war of the world, um, it actually was approved to be built on February 9th of 1920. Now we know February 9th fits the Eve's birth date sequence. If you've been watching any of my videos, Eve's birth date is the formula of Jesus Christ's birth, right? The Eve's and the day of his birth in the first 24 hours. Eve's birthday representing 3 days. So February 9th would fall within that timeline, right? And we already broke down February 10th through the name of Paul, who tackled one of the perpetrators, right? Representing the island of Malta in their celebrations of Paul on a holy feast day, if you will. February 10th, speakingly, which also fits in the Eve's birthday formula. But continuing on from there, so we have a World War One monument. And the time we living in right now, I think that's pretty significant. And then the esoteric symbolisms that sits there is very significant. Now, the name of the street of Union Station, where the stage was set up, where Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and all these guys were celebrating, right, is called Pershing Boulevard. Now, Pershing is a ballistic nuclear missile. I think that's speaking, if you ask me, because what are the odds that they celebrate in the Super Bowl at a area and a place with such rich history pertaining to world wars, if you will, right? Something about that WW is just the WW1, right? The world wars, right? What's the odds that they would have something and celebrate something like that and have all of those people gathered there at one time, and that the Eve's birthday sequence is found there in any way, shape, form, or fashion, right? It all goes together. So Pershing is a ballistic nuclear warhead, if you will. But continuing on from there, those warheads were actually deployed in 1983, which was the year of my birth. That's just another coincidence right there, but it is there nonetheless, right? But continuing on, Contreras, right? Paul Contreras, a surrounding area. In this surrounding area, people were gunned down, right? A fire, a discordant fire, right? Because people were disagreeing with one another and ended up firing off on the crowd, if you will. All right there in the numbers surrounding this whole thing. But we're going to continue to break this down, if you will, right?
A flame serves as an inspiring reminder to mankind, a charge to remember tragedy and triumph in the early 20th century. It is a tribute to a time of honor, courage, patriotism, and of monumental change. But it also stands, first and foremost, as a memorial to all who served and to those whose lives were sacrificed so that the world would be at peace. This is the legacy of the National World War I Museum at Liberty Memorial.
On November 1st, 1921, 3 years after the guns of August were silenced, 100,000 people stood right here to be a part of history.
Hail, hail, the gang's all here.
Not only was this a moment of pride for Kansas City, but a moment of international significance. 5 major Allied military leaders, who had never been together in one place, united to declare this hill as the future site of a monument for all who served and lost their lives in the Great War. 5 years later, President Calvin Coolidge stood on the deck of the completed monument and dedicated it as a place to pause and reflect upon the war. 78 years later, in 2004, Congress designated the Liberty Memorial as the United States' official World War I museum.
But how did Liberty Memorial come to be in Kansas City in the first place?
Even before the armistice in Europe, Kansas City swelled with patriotic spirit. Amidst a campaign to raise money for Allied charities, a movement began for the city to build a memorial of gratitude. And so the Liberty Memorial Association was created, taking into consideration the city of the day, as well as of the future. The committee believed the land near Union Station would be the ideal site.
As for the design, the committee devised a national architecture competition to create an inspiring monument worthy of record, a symbol not of war, but of peace.
Architecture firms from all over the country submitted designs. Ultimately, an impartial jury of architects selected the concept imagined by Harold Van Buren McGonigal, majestic in the Egyptian Revival style with a hint of Art Deco. Construction began July 5, 1923. The final layout allows the tower to stand 414 feet above Pershing Road. Atop the tower, an eternal flame warms the four guardian spirits: sacrifice, patriotism, courage, and honor. Two museum buildings flank the tower with 7,000 square feet of exhibit space. Sphinxes with wings covering each face guard the buildings. One faces east towards the field of Flanders and the horrors of war. The second faces west, looking toward the unknown future. 1934 introduced the Great Frieze on the north wall, depicting the bitterness of war and the blessings of peace. Bronze busts of the Allied commanders were placed on the dedication wall, alongside an honor roll of Kansas City residents who made the greatest sacrifice in those foreign fields. From its proud vantage point overlooking the city, the monument welcomed travelers from Union Station.
So what does World War I have to do with Satan, if you will? Now, when we think about this and we just take down those walls and those barriers of gangbanging on beliefs and religion and different things like that, we can go to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Not that I'm one, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, but their belief settings, if you will. They believe that Satan was cast out of heaven in the year 1914. They believe that during that particular year is why the things that began to happen in the world began to happen in the world. So we can correlate the World War I to Satan. Now, one of the things that tripped me out a little bit about that Super Bowl celebration is that at the end of the whole show, before the shooting took place, Travis Kelce started singing a song by Garth Brooks. Now, anybody that's from Oklahoma know Garth Brooks is an Oklahoma native, right? Yukon, Oklahoma, if you will. It's a lot going on there, but that's a whole nother story. But either way, he started singing, I Got Friends in Low Places. Now, when he started singing, I Got Friends in Low Places, the only thing I could think about was somehow the underworld, Satan, and things like that. The angels that were cast out of heaven. He started singing, I Have Friends in Low Places. It's very interesting that that's the song he would begin to sing. But, I mean, I guess it's a catchy song, if you will. But what friends in low places are we actually talking about? That's the question we need to be asking right there, right? But continuing on from there. Now, we know before the shooting took place in Kansas City that there was a shooting at Joel Osteen's church in Houston, Texas, right? Now, Joel Osteen's church used to actually be a arena for the Houston Rockets. So while we sitting here off of Pershing Boulevard, right, representing a nuclear ballistic warhead, you have the Houston Rockets associated to the shooting in Houston, Texas on the day of the Super Bowl, right? All those things going in correlation and in sequence, if you will, at Lakewood Church, if you will. And when I think about Lakewood, I think about Wormwood. If you go to Russia and places like that, they were pouring uranium and radioactive material into a lake in Russia. And also, back in the day of Chernobyl, when the Chernobyl explosion happened, Chernobyl is also a word for wormwood, if you will. But all of those things, to me, correlate when we talk about wormwood in the Bible, because that would actually be one of the things that were manifest in the book of Revelations, right? But continuing on from there. And it's kind of unique because not only did SpaceX send a rocket up into the sky just a few days ago during the Super Bowl, but Russia also sent a satellite or sent a rocket up into space also at the same time. What are they sending rockets up into space for? And why is people on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. worried about it? Just something to food for thought, you know what I mean? I just read to y'all the book of Isaiah and showed y'all that people gonna be going to hide themselves for what they know is coming upon this earth, and it's people that's already preparing for that right now. And then just think, when we talk about secret societies, you know, one of their mottos, if you will, is ab chaos ordo, which is out of chaos order. And also you can see the number 33 represented on the seal, if you will, of the double-headed eagle. Now, when we think about a double-headed eagle, when you look up the word Vega in its plain meaning, it means a falling eagle, if you will. It is also the seal and the symbol of Russia also. Those are just two things to consider when we're thinking about all these symbolisms, because it's all present, it's all there, if you will. We know that the Jesuits or the Vatican or the Holy Roman Empire, so to speak, if you will, is involved. We broke those things down through the 49ers being San Francisco, which means St. Francis, and our current Pope being Pope Francis, if you will. But the mascots of the not San Francisco 49ers, but the mascot of Kansas City Chiefs, if you will. The mascots of the Kansas City Chiefs is KC the Wolf. Now, we told you the story about Lycan and Arcus, right? How his father was turned into a werewolf for serving him on a platter for food, like he was a sacrificial lamb, if you will, as if he was the bread and wine of Jesus Christ, and that they was going to give the Last Supper, if you will, and break him up. Zeus, the deity of the time, right, was disgusted by that, so he turned all the people that was involved with the feast into wolves, right, representing those plain wolves and they, because I don't think they was wolves in sheep clothing at all when they doing acts like that. But the sheep's clothing part is that they do these things in secrecy, and that's the thing that is being revealed. So I got just a few more talking points to make, and then we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, y'all. But one of the things about the Super Bowl that I also noticed that stood out to me was Kanye West, as usual. Anytime he's somewhere in the building, got to be something going on with Kanye. But anyway, he was at the Super Bowl that day. He was wearing his little mask that he always got on, some type of veil over his face, right? Knowing that we blind. I think that's what he's saying in some way, shape, form, or fashion. He keeps saying Jesus is king, but then he keep making music that's opposite of what he say he about. But then he also telling the truth that we are the true Jews. So I think Kanye is either as brilliant as he say he is, or he confused as people think he is. One of the two. But either way it goes, he had on a mask made by Alexander McQueen, and it had a white description, right, like a brilliant white, if you will, description of Jesus Christ being crucified on his mask. Now, when we look up Alexander McQueen and we just look past the surface of things, you can look up the coat of arms of McQueen, because right there we got the name Alex yet again. But that's not what I want to get into just quite yet, even though Alexander actually has something to do with this continuation of the story. Not just because it's my name, but because it's there. But we'll break those things down in a sense, because it has everything to do with God's judgment in some way, shape, form, or fashion, which you'll see here shortly. But boom. If you look up the coat of arms of McQueen, you'll see a seal with the knight's helmet at the top, and then above that knight's helmet you have a white lion, or a tiger if you will, and I call it a liger because it's like a lion and a tiger, right? But it's holding a bow and arrow, or arrowhead in his hand, right? Just like the Kansas City Chiefs are the Arrowhead Stadium, and a symbol is an arrowhead. This liger, if you will, has an arrow in his hand, right? Now at the bottom, I believe that he's getting ready to do damage, and I think he's used by God, because when I call it a liger, Jesus Christ is the Lion of Judah, but yet this is a tiger with stripes. So I look at it as a lion / tiger, because Jesus Christ took his stripes for our behalf, right? He took his stripes for the sins that were committed throughout all of mankind, throughout all of time, space, and history, if you will, past, present, and future, right? And so I call it a liger in that sense, because it is a wild cat or a wild beast, and it also has the arrowhead, like it's about to give judgment on something, right? Now, it also reminds me of one of the horsemen of the apocalypse, the white horse, right? Because the white horse was given a crown, right, which I believe is a man sitting on David's throne, if you will, and then he's also given a bow and arrow, and he's going out conquering and to conquer, if you will. And so I think that's what that represents. But I don't think he's the bad guy, because I don't think God or Jesus Christ will give anybody a crown and give them authority to go out there and do his will in that type of way. So in some shape, form, or fashion, I think we have some of these ideas of revelations wrong, right? But continuing on. Under the seal of the knight and the helmet and the liger, if you will, with the bow and arrow, are 3 wolves. I believe that these three wolves, in a sense, represent the Antichrist, the dragon, and the false prophet. You know, they're going to be thrown into that lake of fire, if you will. So that's what I see in that right there. Continuing on from there, though, that's in McQueen. Now, the word McQueen itself, when we look up its history, is associated to the name Donald. Now, is that Donald Trump? I'll leave that up for you to decide. But I feel like all these people are players in the game, and no matter how they gang banging towards each other in public and on TV and to us, red and blue, Democrat, Republican, you can say the same thing Christian to Islam, you can say the same thing Blood of Crip. It's gang banging all over the place, and to keep you in your place, because if you don't drop those type of habits or ideas out of your mindset, you're not going to be able to receive the entirety of the truth, if you will. But continuing on from there, so you can see all those symbolisms right there in McQueen. But continuing on from there, so if we just go back a little bit, looking at Kanye West, his first album came out, College Dropout, in 2004. It was released on February 10th, right? Which fits the Eve's birthday sequence of Jesus Christ's birthday, right? So that's there. Now, one of the main songs on College Dropout was Jesus Walks, right? So I think that's very significant when we look at it in that way. He's wearing the Alexander McQueen mask with a white, all whited out Jesus crucified, right? And then you also have all of these correlations right there just through his career and his history. Now, if you fast forward to the year 2007, Kanye West's mother passed away. Now, how does that correlate to my life in any type of way? When I graduated from Millwood Falcons, we had our baccalaureate in Spencer, Oklahoma at True Vine Baptist Church, right?
Rapper Kanye West and other celebrities will be here in Oklahoma City later today to remember his mother.
Donda West died earlier this month after complications from cosmetic surgery. Eyewitness News 5's Adam Singer is in Spencer, where in just a few hours she will be laid to rest.
John Tierney, the friends and family of 58-year-old Donda West, are gathering in Oklahoma City and Spencer this morning to remember her. The funeral is going to be here at 1 o'clock at True Vine Ministries, and we're now just learning more details about her death. The surgeon who operated on Donda West told the LA Times that possible causes include a heart attack, pulmonary embolism, an accidental overdose of drugs prescribed to her for pain after her surgery. Now, Donda West died November 10th from complications from cosmetic surgery. Dr. West taught at Chicago State University for 24 years. She had moved to California, but still has lots of friends in the Oklahoma City area and the Chicago area.
She was a wonderful neighbor and a wonderful friend to me and to my family. And this is a woman who...
That's where he buried his mother at in 2007, right? Fast forward from my graduation. So he buried his mother at the same church that I had my baccalaureate for graduation at. I think that's real significant. Now, if you fast forward from his mother passing away and go to 2021, in 2021, he was staying in the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, right? Millwood Falcons, Atlanta Falcons. And he was making his album tributed to his mother, Donda West, right? So you have both of these correlations years apart, all conglomerating at the same time.
Living inside Atlanta's NFL Stadium as he puts the finishing touches on his new album. He was in Atlanta for a massive listening event at the stadium Thursday, and that album was initially scheduled to be released the next day, but it's since been pushed back a few weeks. And NewsNation correspondent Janelle Fort live for us tonight outside the stadium in Atlanta. Janelle, maybe I should say his temporary residence. How long has he been staying there long? Is he planning to stay there for a little bit longer?
Well, you know, Nicole, we know that he's been here at least since Thursday, since that listening party. He's taking artists in residence to new highs with this stay. Reportedly, he's got a studio inside. They've set up living quarters and possibly a chef. And there's this picture circulating online of them with this makeshift recording studio in one of the locker rooms here. Now, rumors of West staying here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium started over the weekend with this video of the rapper at one of the Atlanta United FC soccer games, walking through the stands. You see him, he's in that red puffy suit, the same suit that he wore during that listening party with that nylon thing over his head. And, you know, this is an album that has been highly anticipated by fans. It's his 10th studio album. It's named after his late mother, Donda. On Thursday, the stadium was packed out. It was sold out, 60,000 people here for that listening party. But there was one issue. Apparently, the album isn't done yet. That's why he's inside now. We talked to officials here at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They've confirmed that he's inside working on that album. We talked to a member of his camp. They also told us that the album now pushed back to August 6th. That's the new release date. And so hopefully that's what ended up happening. But Nicole, this isn't too much out of the ordinary for Kanye West. He's always been a pretty erratic superstar.
Well, I have to say, when it comes to residences, square footage there, pretty good. All right, Janelle Ford, thank you.
And then you also have February 10th is when his first album came out, College Dropout, with Jesus Walks as one of his main hit songs on there, right? But continuing on from there, I think that's real significant. Now, the next thing I'd like to go over is this torch, right? There's a huge torch, 93-foot tall, 3D printed torch that sits at the Raider Stadium, right, where the Super Bowl was played at. Now, how does this torch represent anything that I feel that's coming upon Mystery Babylon, right, or America, if you will? Well, it's called the Al Davis torch for one. Al meaning God, right? El, God, right? And Davis meaning the son of David, right? Which is written on the torch. I believe all of those things are symbolic. So who is this son of David when we read in the Bible, right? We know that King Solomon was one of David's sons who built the temple, right, for God's house, right, as housing the Ark of the Covenant. But we also know that prophesying wise in the book of Jeremiah, it said that that David will be raised back up. This is after David's death, right? That David would be raised back up. But continuing on, we're going to read that verse out the Bible real quick. So I might have this wrong, but don't quote me on this. You can look it up to be for certain. But there were 366 years between King David's time and the time of Jeremiah, right? So that's just something to think about, because right here in Jeremiah 30, we finna read yet another prophecy of David being raised back up, right? So we talking about David resurrected, if you will, in a sense, right here. But this is chapter 30 of Jeremiah. The word came to Jeremiah from the Lord, and thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, write in a book all the words that I have spoken to you. For behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will restore the fortunes of my people, Israel and Judah, says the Lord, and I will bring them back to the land that I have gave to their fathers, and they shall take possession of it. These are the words that the Lord spoke concerning Israel and Judah. Thus says the Lord, we have heard a cry of panic, of terror, and no peace. Ask now and see. Can a man bear a child? Can a man bear a child, y'all? Just something to think about, because it's like he's speaking to the future, if you ask me. Can a man bear a child? Why then do I see every man with his hands on his stomach, like a woman in labor? I mean, is that not what you see going on these days in some way? Why has every face turned pale? Alas, the day is so great, there is none like it. It is a time of distress for Jacob. So this is a time of Jacob's trouble, right? The tribulation, if you will. Yet he shall be saved out of the tribulation. And it shall come to pass in that day, declares the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off your neck, and I will burst your bonds. And foreigners shall no more make servants of him, but they shall serve the Lord their God, and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Then fear not, O Jacob, my servant, declares the Lord, nor be dismayed, O Israel, for behold, I will save you from a far away, and your offspring from the land of their captivity. Jacob shall return and have a quiet ease, and none shall make him afraid, for I am with you to save you, declares the Lord. I will make a full end of all the nations among whom I scattered you, but of you I will not make a full end. So see, he's going to put an end to all the nations to where his people were scattered to, but he's not going to put an end to his people. And those who were grafted in will be coming along as well. Just like when they left in the time of Egypt in the Exodus, there were Egyptians and other people that left with the Israelites, right? But continuing on, it says, I will make a full end of the nations among whom I scattered you, but of you I will not make a full end. That's beautiful right there. So continuing on from there, y'all, that's God speaking right there in Jeremiah chapter 30 that he's going to raise up David. This is after David been perished and passed away. So continuing on. So we have to break this all the way down. We had the Alexander McQueen mask on. We already broke down the seal of McQueen. Now how does Alexander compare and apply to the torch 93 feet tall sitting at the Raider Stadium, right? That's compared to Alexander, who is Paris. Now go ahead and check out this clip and you'll see how Alexander of Paris in mythology is compared to a torch. And remember, it was Apple Music halftime show. So how does an apple apply to this story also? And we know that the apple also applies to paradise, right? When Adam and Eve took a bit of the fruit, right? Say he gonna take off them whips and chains. We don't need no whips and chains. Want you to put that loving on me, baby. All right, let's go. We're continuing on. I got a little excited. So before we get to this clip of Alexander of Paris, right? When we look at this torch from the stadium in Las Vegas, you can see a pyramid of Luxor Hotel and the Sphinx directly out the window from it, right? So that brings me back to these eclipses that's coming over the earth, right? Like we read in Revelation chapter 9, if you will. These, was it Revelation chapter 6? Revelation chapter 6. But that torch is sitting directly across, right? And when we think of these eclipses, I showed you the Aleph Taft if you watch my other videos and how it was making a symbol of the first and the last, if you will, across the United States, right? And it's crossing through Little Egypt, Illinois, if you will, which is named after Cairo, Thebes, and Memphis, if you will, which are all names of Egypt, is why it's called Little Egypt, Illinois. We also know that it's 9.11 square miles, right? So there again, just like you have 89118 in Las Vegas as the zip code at the stadium, you also have 911 square miles in Little Egypt, Illinois, Alexander County, if you will, right? So you got that Alexander popping up everywhere, right? Let's go ahead and check out that story and we'll be right back to it.
In distant Asia Minor, a city shone whose name was Troy. The wealth and splendor of this metropolis eclipsed all neighboring cities. It also had magnificent walls built by the gods. This kingdom developed rapidly. Some people said that the city would become more developed than the legendary Atlantis. But the spinning goddesses of fate knew that the only similarity between Troy and Atlantis was their sad fate. In Troy reigned Priam alongside his wife Hecuba. He had already had his firstborn son Hector, and the queen was pregnant again. The night before the baby was born, the queen had a terrible nightmare. In this dream, the city of Troy was burning in flames. The king visited the oracle to try to understand the meaning of the dream. The answer given by the oracle was desperate. It was said that the birth of the second child would ruin Troy. On that same day, Hecuba gave birth to the child. He was a strong and healthy baby boy. But Priam just wanted to avoid that terrible prophecy. The baby had to be sacrificed to safeguard his kingdom. Hecuba tried to protect her son, whom she had named Alexander, but could do nothing in the face of the king's will. The baby was handed over to the shepherd Agilus, who was given the mission to kill the baby. The shepherd took the baby to a forest at the foot of Mount Ida. But when he arrived there, he didn't have enough courage to carry out the task. He put the baby on the ground and abandoned him to his fate. After several days, the shepherd still had the image of the baby in his mind. He decided to return to the place where he had abandoned him. Incredibly, the baby was in good health, suckled by a she-bear. The shepherd realized that the life of the little prince of Troy would not end prematurely, for this was the will of the gods. Agilus took the child and raised him as his son. The baby was named Paris and grew up along with Agilus's other sons. Paris became a man of impressive beauty, also having great physical strength. Like his adoptive father, he became a shepherd. He had a bucolic life in the countryside. His was the beautiful nymph Oenone, who swore him eternal love. His life did not seem fit for the prophesied destiny, but he did not know that he was about to make a choice that would affect everyone around.
Paris was the son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy. According to lore, the couple already had 50 sons and 50 daughters. His name, ironically, meant defender. Before Paris's birth, Hecuba had a dream in which her child became a flaming torch or brand. The seer Asacus explained that the yet unborn Paris would be the doom of Troy. Asacus also said that on the day of Paris's birth, a child born of royals should be killed to save the kingdom. However, Priam and Hecuba could not bring themselves to kill their baby's son, and instead gave young Paris to a herdsman who would do the deed. The herdsman, also unable to kill the baby, left him to die on Mount Ida, but a she-bear saved the young Paris by giving him milk. When the herdsman returned 9 days later, he found the baby still alive and took him back to Troy. For a time, Paris lived as a shepherd. During this time of his life, Paris met the nymph Oenone as a young man, and they became lovers. During their tryst, Oenone warned Paris of the dangers he would find if he left the Troad, the countryside around Troy, and urged her husband to never visit Sparta. Like many a foolish mortal in Greek myth, Paris ignored these warnings to his sorrow. As a young man, Paris entered a boxing contest at a Trojan festival in which he defeated Priam's other sons. After his identity became known, his father Priam took Paris into his home. Years later, a magnificent ceremony took place on Mount Olympus for the marriage of Peleus and Thetis. Zeus, king of the gods, invited major and minor deities except for Eris, the goddess of strife. In revenge for this slight, Eris decided to cause havoc by throwing the golden apple of discord among the goddesses. She inscribed it with the words, "To the fairest." Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite started quarreling over who should get the apple and asked Zeus to decide. The king of the gods, knowing that his decision would anger any goddess not chosen, chose to appoint Paris to be the judge, knowing Paris to be fair-minded, and that way Zeus could blame Paris for any slights to the goddesses. Paris asked the three to disrobe, but even then he found them to be equal in beauty. So the goddesses decided to bribe him. Hera told Paris that if he picked her, she would appoint him ruler of all Asia. Athena told Paris that she would endow him with battle skills and wisdom. Aphrodite said she would give Paris the most beautiful woman in the world, and Paris chose Aphrodite's bride. Aphrodite believed Helen to be the most beautiful woman in the world, but she already married King Menelaus of Sparta. Paris either stole Helen from Menelaus with help from Aphrodite, or Helen eloped with him of her own free will. In any case, after this event, Menelaus invoked the Oath of Tyndareus, an oath taken by all prospective suitors of Helen, in which they swore to uphold Helen's marriage no matter who she chose. As a result, all the kings of Greece joined the expedition to Troy, thus starting the Trojan War. Menelaus's brother, King Agamemnon of Mycenae, held overall command. The Greeks sacked small towns in or near the Troad, but helped by their allies in Thrace and Asia Minor, the city of Troy itself held out for 10 years. Paris lacked both courage and skill in battle. He preferred to use a bow and arrow, not the weapon of choice for the truly courageous. Indeed, when the wronged Menelaus confronted Paris in single combat, Paris fled when he faced defeat. Paris only made it over the walls of Troy with the help of Aphrodite, and the war continued. At some point late in the war, the Greek hero Achilles died from an arrow that struck him in the heel. Some sources claim that Paris shot Achilles with help from Apollo, while others claim that Apollo transformed into Paris and shot Achilles. Paris himself would later be mortally wounded by Philoctetes, a Greek warrior. At that point, Helen tried to find Paris's former lover Oenon, who had once promised to heal any wounds that Paris happened to suffer. However, the nymph, still angry that Paris abandoned her for Helen, refused to give any help, and Paris died that same day. When Oenon heard about the death, she threw herself into Paris's funeral pyre out of grief. Helen then had to marry Paris's brother Deiphobus, himself killed by Menelaus after the fall of Troy. In the sack that followed, Priam and his remaining sons perished, and the Trojan women passed into slavery. And that is how a prince of Troy caused the destruction of his home city. That wraps things up for this.
In this particular story, you can see America, or Mystery Babylon, and the story is like the city of Troy, if you will. Remember, Mystery Babylon is a city that sits on a hill, right? And it has a woman that rules over many nations, right? The harlot, if you will, ruling over many nations, like the United Nations, right? Which is located in New York City, just like the Statue of Liberty sitting on many waters, if you will. But continuing on from there, you have all these semblances. Remember, 9/11 itself even happened in New York City, World Trade Towers, if you will, right? But continuing on, so the story of Alexander, Paris, if you will, is just like the story that is going to happen, biblically speaking, to America, if you will. Continuing on, that torch, right? When we go to the story back to Arcus, right, the little bear, if you will, Patrick Mahomes, because Mahomes means bear, right? When we go back to that story, we know that Arcus was sacrificed. He was a human being that was killed. Now, even Kanye West confessed that his mother was given up in a sense, even though he didn't want to do it, but it happened due to his career. And he confessed that, right? And Arcus, just like his father, like him, the werewolf man, sacrificed his son. In this industry of things, a lot of sacrificing is going on. When Jesus Christ was the ultimate sacrifice, there should be no sacrificing and giving up people that you care about and that you love just so you can gain bribes and finances, just like it spoke about in Isaiah, right? It's a lot going on, right? Said they'll sell you for a pair of shoes. They'll sell you for some silver. They'll overweigh the scales and charge you more than what it costs. Hey, that's all biblical speaking. Why do you pay for things that are free, if you will? Now, the Federal Reserves apply to these type of things because the Federal Reserve, which was started in Georgia on Jekyll Island, Savannah, where I used to live, right? All of those things apply. How does the Raiders, if you will, apply to the Bible? Well, many people heard of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, talking about the Ark of the Covenant, but that's not where I'm going with this particular story. I want to go back to the story of a character in the Bible known as Judah Maccabees, right? And these particular books of Maccabees was taken out of the Bible, but you can find these in the other books of the Bible. So, boom. Who is Judah Maccabees? Well, he lived at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes was known as a archetype for the Antichrist, if you will. And I believe that's representative of today because the Antichrist is present in the world. A lot of people just liked and served and didn't see them for who they were. But that's another day, another story. So Antiochus IV led an army to attack Egypt. And on his way back through Jerusalem after a successful campaign in Egypt, right? The high priest Menelaus allegedly invited Antiochus inside the second temple. And in violation of the Jewish law, he raided the temple treasury for 1,800 talents, right? So he raided the temple, right? Now, what does Judah Maccabees represent in this? Because we're going to break that down when we talk about the Georgia Guidestones, where the Georgia Guidestones were spoke of, and how they had this whole plan for a post-apocalyptic world, if you will, right? Which it don't sound too bad except for probably the first part. But other than that first part of the Georgia Guidestones, everything else that I see written on there kind of makes sense to me, if you ask me. But let's see who Judah Maccabees is. And then I'm going to break down the coat of arms of the Elberton, Georgia, where the Georgia Guidestones were, because I believe there are correlations there in some shape, form, or fashion. But go ahead and wipe and check that out, and we're going to come back to it.
Really cool that maybe many of you have never seen before and you probably don't even know about, but these are the Georgia Guidestones. This is like for post-apocalypse living, how to, maintain humanity and balance and all that good stuff. So yeah, a little bit different video today. Actually, my wife and one of our closest friends, RJ, were on our way up to Asheville, North Carolina, just on a little road trip, and I figured, hey, let's stop by and see this. Somehow I came across this thing on the internet. I'm like, this looks pretty cool. It's kind of metal too, if you think about it, talking about apocalypse stuff, Anyway, let's see what these stones say. I'm stereotyping, but I'm pretty sure this dude listens to metal. Yes. So my wife again, you guys know her, you've seen her before, and Reverend RJ. Actually, RJ is the dude, one of our closest friends. He's the guy who actually, he married us. He became ordained to marry us in Vegas a couple years ago. There are guidelines for the Georgia Guidestones. This thing was like put together in 1980. You guys know 80, that was a good year, good decade, music, movies, and all that good stuff. So there are astronomical features here. Channel through stone indicates celestial pole. Horizontal slot indicates annual travel of sun. Sunbeam to the capstone marks noontime throughout the year. So you can see there are several stones here. It's really cool. It's like Stonehenge of Georgia here. But they're written in different languages here. Here are the languages. We've got the Guidestones written in Russian and Chinese. We've also got, of course, English here. And forgive my shadow, I'm trying to move out of the way. There we go. English and Spanish. Okay, we've got Hindi. And then we've got Arabic and Hebrew. All right, guys, now it's reading time with Jason. Hey, that should be a series. So I'm gonna read the English stone to you real quick here. And this is gonna be quite interesting. Again, these are rules for post-apocalypse, so we should listen closely. All right, so I am not on the sunny side here, but I'm gonna read these off to you. So maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. Unite humanity with a living new language. Rule passion, faith, tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Protect people and nations with fair laws and just courts. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world court. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. Now that's an interesting concept. We should probably go ahead and start that now. Prize truth, beauty, love, seeking harmony with infinite. And I skipped one here, sorry guys. So balance personal rights with social duties. Hey, I personally think that's really important. Be not a cancer on the earth. Leave room for nature. Leave room for nature.
So, in short and in all, there is a plan against the people of God. And there is a plan against the people of the world in general, right? As you've seen on Georgia Guidestones. But the whole deal is that when I talked about on the last video I did about Dominion being recorded in or taking place in the city of Las Vegas on the TV show where the angels came to the earth to take and wipe out the human race, but the angel Michael came to defend the human race, right? But in that TV series, there were classes of systems of people called the V system, right? Now, the V system is a rigid occupation based on social ordering, which ensures the vital work of building and running Vega is accomplished. Inspired by his training at West Point, General Ryson worked with the Senate to create the system. The class system is preserved to be unfair by the lower classes who are not allowed to move above their stations. So it's not made for lower class people. It's made for the systems of people that's above a certain class. Starting at V1, the lowest social class in Vega, sometimes referred to the derogatorily as V0. The V1s were composed of the unemployed, the orphans, criminals, as well as those who didn't possess any significant or useful working skills. V2s were the working class citizens of Vega, composed of menial laborers, as well as the lower grade military personnel such as common soldiers and security officers. V3s were the middle class or white-collar citizens of Vega, those with enough skills to perform either office-oriented or technological tasks, such as nurses, technicians, clerks, engineers, as well as higher-ranking military officers. V4s are the blue-collar citizens of Vega, and these included farmers, ranchers, natural engineers, as well as water, waste managers, all of whom were afforded more elevated positions than the V2s due to the crucial role that they played in maintaining the city's infrastructure. V5s, the learned class of Vega, composed of the military leaders, teachers, judges, attorneys, priests, as well as the physicians and scientists, the immediate families of the V6s, their children, grandchildren, siblings, etc., were also granted the rank of V5, both for their safety as well as to ensure the line of succession in the event that their V6 relatives either died or were forcibly moved or became unable to perform their duties. The V6s, which is the top rank, the ruling class of Vega's government, which consisted exclusively of the lady or the lord of the city, as well as the members of the Senate, right? So you had this whole class system, right? But the class system wasn't made for everybody. It really was made for the higher ups. Now that's the destroyers destroying, that's the betrayers betraying, that's the bribers bribing, and that's those who are not closing their ears to evil. That is those who are not closing their hands to taking what they shouldn't be taking from one to the next, right? They doing whatever dirty schemes they can to get over. Now, continuing on from there, God is coming to deal with things like that so that he can make a just system. See, the New World Order really is God bringing all of the enemies under one roof so that he can make them a footstool. Now, when they become under one world and one order, that's going to become a footstool for the Lord to rule in. It's not for the Antichrist. It's not for the false prophet. It's not for the dragon to rule in. It's actually for Christ's reign is why the New World Order is actually being established. He's just going to let the ones who doing the dirty work do the dirty work and think wherever they think they're going with it, think that they're going to get there with it. But continuing on. So where is this all boiling down to? What is this all coming down to, right? This is coming down to Jesus Christ coming for his bride, if you will. Now, at the end of the Super Bowl, when Usher got done performing, remember bringing the whole world to the A, right? Bringing the whole world to Revelations 404, bringing them to Georgia.
Every winter, Jewish families gather to light a branched candelabra called a menorah. For 8 nights, they celebrate their families and celebrate their faith. The holiday is called Hanukkah, also known as the Festival of Lights. When we think of Hanukkah, we think of the menorah. Its 8 flames burn in testament to a glorious victory that took place over 2,000 years ago. Around 200 BC, the Jewish people in Jerusalem were living under Egyptian rule, though they remained largely free to work and worship in accordance with their customs. Then, in 175 BC, Antiochus IV Epiphanes ascended to the Syrian throne, invaded Egypt, and desecrated Jerusalem. In an attempt to assimilate the Judean people, Antiochus forced them to worship Greek gods and outlawed Judaism, banning all Jewish rituals upon threat of death. The ultimate insult came in 168 BC, when Antiochus seized the Jewish Holy Temple in Jerusalem and dedicated it to the worship of Greek god Zeus. For a Jewish high priest named Mattathias, it was time to take a stand. Together with his 5 sons, Mattathias sparked a revolt, pitting the desperate Jewish faithful against vastly superior Syrian armies. The battle raged for 3 years. Against improbable odds, the Jewish uprising, led by Mattathias' son, Judah Maccabee, emerged victorious. Judah Maccabee and his small army of soldiers recaptured Jerusalem in 165 BC and liberated the Holy Temple. According to the Talmud, the Jewish high priests eagerly prepared to light the ceremonial menorah, the eternal flame which would rededicate the desecrated temple to the glory of God. But they found that the Syrians had defiled all but a small flask of oil. It was enough to light the menorah, but for a single night. Hours turned to days, and miraculously, the menorah burned on until 8 nights had passed and more oil could be produced. It was time for Hanukkah, Hebrew for dedication. Against all odds, the menorah had not been extinguished, and so the flames of the branched menorah are a potent symbol of the Jews' indomitable faith. The menorah holds 9 candles, with the center candle used to light 1 candle on each of the 8 nights of Hanukkah.
The ultimate insult to the Jews came when Antiochus ordered that the heart and soul of Judaism, the temple in Jerusalem, be transformed into a Greek temple.
The king sent a man to compel the Jews to profane the temple in Jerusalem and dedicate it to the Olympian Zeus. The temple was filled with reveling and debauchery by the pagans, who took their pleasure with prostitutes and had intercourse with women in the sacred precincts.
The uprising against Antiochus began in the countryside, for the king had ordered his men to travel from village to village with an idol of Zeus.
The king's commissioners came to the town of Modein to make them sacrifice. Many Israelites gathered around them, but Mattathias and his sons drew apart. The king's commissioners then addressed Mattathias. "You are a respected leader, a great man in this town. Be the first to step forward and obey the king's decree. You and your sons shall be honored with gold and silver and many presents." Raising his voice, Mattathias retorted, "Even if every nation living in the king's dominion obeys him, I, my sons, and my brothers will still follow the covenant of our ancestors." As he finished speaking, a Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar. When Mattathias saw this, he was fired with zeal. He killed the king's commissioners and tore down the altar. Then he fled with his sons into the hills.
Mattathias and his sons would soon become known as the Maccabees. Their uprising was proof that the Jews' commitment to the religion of the divine book had become so strong they would die to defend it.
The Maccabees went to war to put an end to the religious persecution, to reclaim the temple, to purify it. In the history of the world, this is the very first war that we know of that people went to war over religious freedom or freedom of conscience. This is the first time a state tampered with a religious tradition, which resulted in the people saying, "No, we will go to fight. We cannot tolerate this." That is the War of the Maccabees.
Many of the Maccabean rebels hid in caves in the countryside to avoid Antiochus' army. Not only were they greatly outnumbered, they faced the serious handicap of having to fight according to biblical law. The Bible said it was illegal to fight on the Sabbath day. So when the Greeks tried to smoke out a large group of rebels during Sabbath, the rebels decided they would rather die and seek their reward in the next life than break God's law.
They offered no opposition. Not a stone was thrown. There was no barricading of the hiding places. They only said, "Let us all die innocent. Let heaven and earth bear witness that you are massacring us with no pretense of justice." The attack was pressed home on the Sabbath itself, and they were slaughtered with their wives and children to the number of 1,000 persons.
This introduces the issue of martyrdom for the first time in something of a systematic way. We hear of Jews, for instance, refusing to fight on the Sabbath, and they are martyred.
So when we think about Elberton, the town in Georgia where the Guidestones was located at, it means town of Elbert. So what does Elbert itself mean? It means the noble and brilliant one, right? The noble and brilliant one. Now when we look up the coat of arms, you can see a man with a hammer in his hand, because Judah Maccabees is the hammer of Judah, right? Because that seems like that's God's weapon, if you will. Those are the weapons that they will be formed, but not against you. See, the weapons were formed and they were meant to prevail, but they weren't meant to prevail against God's people. They were made for the same things Jesus Christ that he said he could do, right? But continuing on, we're going to separate spirit from soul and flesh from marrow and bone, if you will. But you can see a man sitting on top of a knight's helmet, because he is that warrior, he is that soldier, and he's naked. He don't even have on no clothes, but he got that hammer in his hand. And in the crest of the seal, you can see an eagle, if you will, or a griffin. Remember, Vega is a fallen eagle, if you will. But continuing on from there. So back during the Super Bowl, after Usher gave his, he actually ended up marrying his wife, right? And so you actually had a wedding that took place after the Super Bowl. Now his wife's name is Jennifer, which means white one. And her last name is Gogogochia, which is the upper house, which is symbolic of the upper room in the Bible, right? When Jesus came before his disciples transfigured. So we have right there in her name, white one, Gogochia, the upper house or the upper room. That's all symbolic of what Christ is coming to do, right? Now, Christ came into the upper room to see his disciples because they was in hiding. They were scared. They didn't know what the future held after Jesus was crucified on the cross. And he came in his transfigured state. He showed them himself as he showed James, John, and Peter. But he let them touch the wounds. He let them eat some food and drink some water so that they could know that Jesus Christ was actually both his glorified self, but yet that he was still a human being in the sense he was capable of eating food, but being at his highest self, is his highest rate of being, combining the ethereal plane with the physical plane, right? Which is all like the Kabbalistic tree in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Two of the brightest stars in the summer sky are Vega and Altair. These stars are also figures in the famous Chinese story, The Cowherd and the Weaver Girl. This story is thousands of years old and has many variations. The Weaver Girl is the star Vega, and she is a fairy princess, a daughter of the sky goddess. The Weaver fell in love with the celestial cowherd, the star Altair. Their love was forbidden, but they refused to leave each other, and so the cowherd was exiled from the sky, lost his memory, and became mortal. After his human parents died, the cowherd's brother and sister-in-law sent him away with only an old ox and a cart. Unbeknownst to them, the ox was another former star, who would have been cast to the earth when he tried to defend the cowherd. The cowherd and the ox survived together and became close friends. One day, when the Weaver Girl was visiting the earth, the ox told the cowherd where to find her, and that if he proposed, she would become his wife. When the cowherd approached the Weaver Girl, she immediately recognized him as her lost love. The two were married, and they raised 2 children, and for a time were very happy together, living a humble and peaceful life, making a living tending their livestock and weaving. Eventually, their dear friend the ox died of old age, but before he did, the ox told the cowherd to save his skin, for they could use it to fly into the sky. Eventually, the goddess learned that the weaver and the cowherd were together. Furious, she sent soldiers to retrieve the weaver. The soldiers grabbed the weaver and took her back into the sky, but the cowherd refused to let her go. Together with their 2 children, the cowherd took the hide of the ox and used it to follow his wife into the sky. Just when the family was about to reunite, the sky goddess took out a hairpin and used it to carve an immense, impassable river in the sky. We see this river as the Milky Way. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, Thousands of magpies came together and formed a bridge across the river, allowing the lovers to run to each other. Seeing the joy of the family when it reunited, the heart of the sky goddess was softened. She would permit the cowherd and weaver to be together for one night each year. And so, on the 7th day of the 7th lunar month each year, thousands of magpies form a bridge across the Milky Way, and for just one day, the lover's family can be whole.